Welcome to the Aro Benaiah Show, where we celebrate hands-on entrepreneur, blue-collar perfection, and trade people turning colossus into success story. Today's guest is Sonny Grappone, founder of Precision Accounting and Consulting, but his path to financial experts didn't start in the bedroom. It began in great entrepreneurship, owning an octo body shop, overcoming personal battle, and raising to build career in high-stake finance. His story is one of resilience, reward hustle, and reinvention. I'm excited of our audience, audience to hear how it's all unfold. Sonny, welcome to the show. Were you more of a thinker or were you more of an observer of your environment or growing up?
Growing up, I guess I was more of an introvert, if that makes sense, right? I was kind of do-it-yourself person. I really didn't observe too much in the beginning. I grew up with a single mother, that worked two jobs, cooked, cleaned every day, came home. She was from a third world country in Guyana. So my mother came here. She basically lived the American dream. She came here, she worked hard with the company, and she worked her way up. And, school and studies was always the big thing in my household. So, I always had to, perform at the highest standard, because my mother's mentality was that we were given such a gift to be blessed with a life in America and all the opportunity that we had, So, I was always pressed upon, to make the most of it, and take advantage of everything that I had, compared to other people in America. People looked at us from the outside in. We didn't have a lot, but to us, we had a lot. And so I was fortunate enough to move out to Long Island, New York, which is a very, I wouldn't say wealthy area, but it's one of the most expensive areas to live in America. My mother worked very hard, saved up all her money, and was able to afford a house out here for us. And and then she was able to put me through a great school, and I went through my trials and tribulations, meaning I went through my roller coaster of ups and downs,
Yeah.
making mistakes, you know, living and learning through life, I find that, in my opinion, you don't really know truly who you are and what you want to do until, it's going to sound weird, until you turn the age of 25. I feel like
Hmm.
25 is like the age where like you mature and your mind is at a level where you can retain information and actually appreciate it. I hated school growing up. I hated it. I could not. I never wanted to be there, even though because my mother pushed it upon me so much. I just couldn't, I couldn't grow to like it. But when I reached, the age of 25, I found myself maturing. And before that, I was working, not dead end jobs, but I was working like regular jobs. Like I was working in a catering hall. I started my own auto detailing business. I was always an entrepreneur, so I guess that's where I get it from starting my own business. I always had some type of side hustle ever since I was the age of 14. I was bagging
Wow.
groceries at my mother's store. Doing that on the weekends. Building computers for people. I made that a business for myself, and then I progressed to, going into auto body and fixing up people's cars because I had an app for it. And I got tired of doing that because after doing that for a while, you start to get bad knees, a bad back. And I said, if I do this for 20 years, I'm going to be done. And so I had to go back to school, and the rest was, it was a long journey. It took me about 5 years, but I did it. And I went back for my degree in accounting.
And that was really amazing. The fact that you were resilient all through this period into the various trade and you were still going on and on and on. Your first hustle, at what age were you doing it and how did you get started?
Yeah. So my mother worked for a supermarket called Waldbaum's. It was a very big supermarket, where they sold groceries, regular food stuff.
Yeah.
And her and my father worked there, and my mother met my stepfather at her work. So when they met, they got married, and they bought a house out on Long Island, right? And when we moved out to Long Island, they would still have to travel to Queens, New York, which was a far drive every day. They didn't want to leave me alone, so I would have to go with them to work on the weekends, and I would just sit there, so all of a sudden one of the women told me, why don't you help me bag some groceries, so I started bagging groceries, and I put a tip jar out, people started tipping me, and all of a sudden within like a weekend, I'm making $100 a day, for a 14-year-old kid, back then. That was a lot of money back then,
Yeah.
so like that's where I started with, like, where I actually started to make money. And then my first real job was working for a Kmart. That was my first job. I was 16 years old when I started there. Just be doing a regular cashier, making money for the weekend, and that type of stuff. But since the beginning, since I worked, my mother regimented me. She was a bookkeeper, my mother.
Yeah.
So my mother always knew how to save money, plan ahead for the future. So since I was 16, my mother would always make me, she would make me pay my own bills at 16 years old, and she would show me how to, every week, like say I got paid $400, right, a week, and my bills were, 1,600 a month or something like that. Every week she would make me give her $400, $400. I'm sorry. She would make me give her $400 a week. The math was a little off there. So say I made like 800. She would make me give her 400 a week, right? And then by the end of the month, I would have $1,600 to pay my bills. She started me off doing that when I was 16, and I'm 40, almost 41 years old now, and I still do that to pay my. That's how I pay my bills today. Whatever my bills are, and whatever I get paid, I put it away every week, and I never fall behind. And like, so just little quirks like that,
Yeah.
help me build to who I am today.
Your story is very interesting and really amazing. You learning how to do your accounting personally didn't just come from the book side, it come from experience, being that you have gone through it over and over and over, and it has come to stick with you compared to so many who are actually reading books to actually get that started. That was really amazing.
Yeah.
Your view of money and about success owing to how you started out doing those jobs and some of the side hustles.
Yeah, I have a saying. Either you can help make someone rich, or you can make yourself rich.
Hmm.
So meaning, I spent a lot of years always working two jobs, right? I would always work for somebody, doing, either working for a company or whatever it may be, right? And then I would always have my own side hustle that I would work on the side doing whatever it may be. I always find an app for it, I remember um, one thing I came up with, I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that, on social media, they would come up with these, how do you say it? So on social media, we came up with this idea to raffle off items like that, what people would want, like say like a brand new 55-inch screen TV, a PlayStation,
Yeah.
golf clubs, whatever. Right. So we would say, everybody, there's 50 slots. Everybody puts in $25 for a slot, and then and then whatever those items were, right? Say each item you had on there, say you had 5 items, right? And we would raffle off at the end of say we got 25 people at, $20 a pop or whatever, 50 people. We would do a little raffle, and whoever won, they would pick that product. Now, the money that they would give us, 25, 50 to 25 people giving us $25 each, that would surmount the amount of the actual gift that they would win. So say the
Hmm.
gift they won was like $400. Well, the raffle, when it was all said and done, cost me 600. So I made $200, $300, off that one raffle.
Yeah.
But it caught on because people liked, the excitement or the thrill of like, oh, I'll play $25 and try to win like a $500 item, So like these were like the mentalities like I would always like think of like, when I was looking at things like, oh, this is I would see something, and then I would make it better. You know what I mean? Or I
Yeah.
would spruce it up. That's my ability to kind of always do that. I'm always in the entrepreneurial mindset where like um I can't always sit and do one thing. Like I have my accounting business, At the same time, right now, I'm working on my insurance license. So I want to combine insurance and accounting, because it goes hand in hand with together, And
Yeah.
insurance is residual income, meaning that you make commission off the insurance that you sell people, but it's in perpetuity. So meaning that you're going to get paid that commission until that person leaves.
Yeah.
So that's residual income, right? So like that's the type of income like I want, right? So I set up facets, I set up little businesses outside of my accounting practice where I get involved, where I can make residual income. I always prepare for the worst, right? Not that it ever happens, but like say for God forbid my business goes belly up, well then I have five other things that are in place that are making me money. Do all
Wow.
of them make me a lot of money? No, one of them does, and the other, kind of trickles in. But the way I started really going out and working for myself was when I started working in the corporate world. Um, and I started working for other entrepreneurs also. And in the beginning, you have to put in a lot of hard work. You can
Yeah.
if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to learn your trade, and you're only going to learn your trade if you work for somebody else. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Nobody just starts a business straight out, and they say I'm going to learn this and that's it. No, you got to learn the trade. You got to get some experience and then bring that out, into your own business. But you can't be a 9 to 5 guy. Meaning you can't work 8 hours and then like once 5 o'clock hits, I'm going home. Like that doesn't work, So like I always would come in, I would be the first one in and the last one to leave,
Mm.
right? Like I would, my last company I worked for, everybody did that. At 5 o'clock, they were out the door. I would stay here till 7, 8 o'clock because the guy I was working for said, "Listen, you show me you want to be a part of this company, you want to bring in business, you want to be a part of this company, and you show me that you value this company like it's your own, I'll give it to you." And I was the only one that took that opportunity, because after a couple of years I saw how much money I was making this guy. I was making him a lot of money. I saw how much he was bringing in and how much I was making at the end of the day, and like, it was a lot of money compared to what I was making. And I'm married. I have two young daughters, right? Like I have
Wow.
a home, so like I have to provide for, so I said, screw this, I'm not going to make this guy money anymore. I'm going to make it my own. So I made a goal to bring in enough business in my accounting firm that I was working for where I would have the bargaining power to say, like, listen, now that I brought in
Yeah.
this much business, I want 50% of the business. If I don't get 50% of the business, I'm taking my business and I'm going on my own. And he agreed. And I didn't tell him I was going to do that, but I wanted to see what his reaction was going to be first when I came up to him and I said, listen, I had signed this really big client and I brought them in, and it was going to be a really big commission, for all of us. And I came in with the opportunity. I said, listen, the only way I'm going to bring in this big client is if I get 50% of the business, and that's what started my journey. That 50% now turned into multiple clients. Now going on my fifth year now, and we have a successful accounting practice.
Wow. Wow. That was really amazing. Yeah, I think it's the fact you make reference of that entrepreneurship when you're starting out. It doesn't just start by working for yourself. You start by working with someone else's business first. Learn all you can in terms of their structures and everything, because that is going to help you a whole lot while you are creating your own business, which is very, very profound. Being that, because sometimes my take is, especially for those who want to learn any trade at all, the surest part is for them to look for a platform where they can learn from, do things, a lot of efforts to actually work on that job very well, so that when, even if at the end of the day they leave, they will leave with a whole lot of career capital. They can actually go and do their own things or transfer it to another thing, which was really profound. And your story just speak volume to it. And also, I want to actually dive in, being that your auto body detailing a bit related to the blue collar job. When you were actually starting that job, how did you get started and how was it? I just want something that my audience can actually benefit, see a glimpse of themselves, those who are also in that particular field. How was it like when you were doing that job, and what was your setback, and how were you able to come up
Sure.
to money?
Sure, yeah. I mean, listen, I always tell myself, I always go with the mentality, right, that I could lose all of this in any day. My business can go under any day, and I always try to go with the mentality that if I ever lose my business, am I willing to go back and mop floors again? Am I willing to go back and clean bathrooms again? And the truth is, yes, I would. I'm humble enough to know I don't forget where I come from, and I'm not too good to do those type of jobs, you know. So like I think God willing, like I think that's why God's blessed me so much. Is like I still keep that humble mentality. That like if I ever lose anything, yeah, I'm willing to go back. I worked in I don't know if you guys have it over there. I worked in private delis, right? A deli where they make sandwiches, right? Cold cut
Yeah.
sandwiches, turkey, right? That type of stuff. So I used to work in a deli for God for a good portion of my life. I worked in the delis for like about 15 years, almost, right?
Wow.
So
Wow.
I worked. Yeah, I worked through. That's how I worked through school, right? I went to
Hmm.
school later in life. I went to school at 25, like I told you, and it took me 5 years to get through school. So figure I started working in delis by the time I was 17, and they were easy. It was good money, but you had to work really hard. You had to work 60. I was working 60, 70-hour work weeks, 7 in the
Hmm.
morning till 6 at
We.
night. Yeah, standing on your feet all day. But that made me who I am today. Like that made me with that, like sitting in an office,
Yeah.
it's a different type of toughness, right? It's thinking. You realize that when you go from blue collar to white collar, and you think to yourself, oh, I standed on my, I stood on my feet all day, doing construction or working in a deli. Like I could do, I could I could sit at a desk any day. After like 2 months of doing that type of work, of sitting at a desk and really working your mind, I could see why people really wanted to drink it right after they worked. Like I never used to get that. I really didn't. Like after somebody works, they come home, I want a beer. I was never like that. And then all of a sudden, when I started working, where like I really had to use my mind and really concentrate, and
Yeah.
it's a different type of tired, man. And like you could
Yeah.
see why people would take a load off. But for people to compare, to another thing is like I made a lot of mistakes when I was younger. I was a party animal. I partied a lot. I did. I drank a lot. Um, I got into other stuff that I shouldn't have. I worked hard and I played hard. I was the type where I would work. I would go out and party till 4 or 5 in the morning, and then I would have work 2 hours later and work the whole day. And your body can only take so much of that after a while.
Yeah.
And I saw the route I was going, where like I saw people that I have friends that are my age that still do that, that still drink every day, go to work a dead end job, and that's all their life is going to be. And that, listen, there's no looking down on that. If that's what you're comfortable with, I understand that. But if you want more, you can't live that lifestyle. It's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. That was really, really key. I think while you were actually sharing your own experience, it just dawned on me that having some layers of skill when it comes to blue collar entrepreneur, it's a lifesaver. Being that you make reference of the fact that even if everything turned upside down now, you can still go back to do those other little jobs. Being that you already have the skills required to get this job done, which simply means skills in a way has a way of guiding, giving us a little safety net when when it actually there's a turn. Now, that was really amazing. And the fact that your grit through your school, doing jobs up to 60 to 17 hours work week that was crazy actually. That was a whole lot. When you actually switch from your blue collar to that of finance, what was the switch like? Was it very demanding for you? How were you able to cope? And what was the changes? And what was your difficulties? Why you were actually more like transiting from one of those career to the other?
It's a great question. I really like that question, because I always tell people that. It's a subject I bring up a lot that when I talk to people. Um, I have a very, I'm not very polished. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Like, I could still fit in with the blue collar people because I
Yeah.
talk more like them. Maybe I act more like them. So when I came from that blue collar world and I had my first accounting job in the corporate world, I was working in New York City in Manhattan, in these big skyscrapers at the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
That was one of my jobs I worked at.
Oh wow.
Working with a lot of high powered people, and here I am, this guy that worked at this deli, and all of a sudden yeah, I'm working at this like I was working at this Google tech firm, okay, where like they had a private chef bring you breakfast every day. They made you lunch. They had pool tables, game
Wow.
rooms. Yeah, you could go outside the balcony. They had a balcony up on the World Trade Center, like on the 60th floor, and you walked out this balcony and you had the whole New York City skyline looking at you with the Statue of Liberty. It was like, here I am, this kid that came from nothing, and I'm standing on this balcony overlooking the city, working with like people like, it's just like, when I think about it, I get so like the hairs on my arms stand up, like, because like, how the hell did I get here? And it's always the composure that I always keep in the back of my mind, and I don't know if that will ever leave. That like I don't fit in, and that's the honest truth. Most people will say, "Oh, I can work with." Listen, at the end of the day, everybody's nervous, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day, everybody wants to fit in. You want to prove that you are just as good as anybody else, okay? But let me
Yeah.
tell you something. After a couple months of working in those places, right, I started doing consulting. That was my first type of job, consulting, where
Yeah.
I would go from job to job and help them with projects. I founded a job with a company that would consult me out to these big places in New York City. So I would work around these big companies, and it was very intimidating. Like I said, from where I came from. And then once I got the hang of it, and I started getting comfortable, and I actually started looking at these people and seeing what they were doing.
Yeah.
You want to know the truth? They're not that smart. Okay, they're not that smart. That's the truth. I remember because I was like, I remember looking at them and being like, after I would get to know them and talk to them and see their work, I'm like, this guy's not that smart. I'm not. Like I can do what he's doing. And when you see that and you come to that realization that there is a talent level to work. Don't get me wrong. There
Yeah.
are Michael Jordan, right? There are LeBron James, there are Steph Currys out there in the workforce that are just talented, their brains, they just have it, right? But that's not the majority of the workforce. The
Yeah.
majority of the workforce is how hard are you willing to work, right? You
Yeah.
can't teach work ethic. That's one thing I always said. You cannot teach work ethic, right? So
Hmm.
that's what separates
Yeah.
them from me. Is not that they're smarter than me, is that they're putting in more effort than me,
Money what?
right? Yeah, of course, So so you can't walk in there intimidated and like knowing like you got to be willing to tell yourself like I am as smart as this guy, and I'm going to outwork this guy, even more, to get where I need to be. And you know what? It's worked out tenfold for me, trying to stay at that level all the time, and I surround myself with always, it's so important if you're ever transitioning from blue collar to white collar that you surround yourselves with like-minded people.
Yeah.
Like I always surround myself with people that are visionaries, people that think outside the box, people that aren't afraid to share ideas.
Yeah.
So many people are afraid to share ideas with other people in their workspace because they're afraid of being called out as stupid, or people
Yeah.
won't like that idea, which that will never happen. But like they're just afraid that their idea is not good enough. I want to be surrounded about around those people that are doing that, that are always thinking of good ideas, thinking outside the box, pushing the limit. Like those are the people I want to be around. So
Yeah.
it's very important, to me, to like, you got to surround yourself with the right people, and you got to realize that you can do anything that these people can do.
Wow. This is amazing. I, I think while you're sharing your stories, it just dawned on me that if blue collar entrepreneurs can have the same mindset, it will really help them in their confidence in terms of bidding for job, doing their job with the kind of energy that yes, I'm actually offering value here. I'm not just coming here to just be in this particular space. I'm really doing the much so that self confidence will influence how they carry themselves and how they do the things they do. which is very, very, very key. And also, you mentioned that you were consulting for this big, big company in I, and it was really interesting hearing that. I want to know why you're working with them, and I know you work for some trade businesses too during those period of time. What was some common problem you noticed in those trade businesses? Why you work with them? Why you're consulting for them?
Basically, I was consulting for them. I worked for a consulting firm. My first real job out of accounting was I worked for a big hospital, and I worked there for about a year. And I wanted to go do something else, and I found this consulting gig where basically they would place you in these big companies
Yeah.
that needed somebody to work temporarily. They didn't want to hire someone full time. They just needed to
Oh,
help with certain projects. So basically, that's how it happened for me. So I got into this company, and that's what gave me all my experience because I got to work around these, innovators and people that were like really, powerful people in finance, and I learned a lot from them. But I will
yeah.
say this is, I went from that, okay, consulting for a few years, and then I hated it. I got
Uh,
tired of commuting. I was on the
mhm,
train for 4 hours a day. 2 hours there, 2 hours back. Um, I wasn't spending time at home with my wife. I was working for some really nasty people at the end, and it came to a point where it was either my sanity or I was sacrificing my sanity for a few dollars. And I remember having the conversation with my wife, saying that like I don't think I can work here anymore. And one of the people I consulted for, where I am right now in this office, I consulted for briefly for a couple of weeks with this guy, and it was a small business, and he did accounting for small to mid-sized businesses. And I consulted him, and he really liked me, and he was trying to hire me for a long time, but he couldn't afford me. I couldn't, not that he couldn't afford me, he just couldn't give me the salary I wanted.
yeah.
But I took the opportunity, and I said, you know what? I think I'm going to go with him and see how it goes. So I took less money, and it was the best thing I ever did.
Wow.
Because when I did that, that's who took me partner into my own business. And I'm
Hmm.
here 6 years later, right? 7 years now, sorry, 7 years later, where he became a partner in my business that I always had. I always told you I always had side businesses. When I
Yeah.
became an accountant, I always did side accounting businesses. And it was called precision accounting. And I would do people's books, and I would do, their bookkeeping, whatever I could do. And then he became partner with me in that company. So now he owns his company, his accounting company, and then my and part and piece of my company also. So it was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I
Wow.
learned more working at a small place with 4 people. I think we have a staff now of 10 people
Oh,
here,
wow.
and we have staff overseas that we also have.
Okay.
Um, I learned more working with 10 in a small office than I ever did working at a big corporation.
Okay.
Because here you get your hands in everything,
Yeah.
and everything. When you're working at these corporations, you're working on a small piece. You're working on a very small portion, so you don't really learn like, the crux.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And also, I actually want to ask, being that you do consulting and yeah, you relate with a whole lot of small businesses and managing their finance. What are those common problems do you see in trade people or who are just starting out? How in terms of managing their finance and in terms of managing their money, in terms of the businesses, what was the common mistake they make in aspect of finance?
Oh, what's a common mistake? Um, well, from a business owner perspective, right? From business owners, um, the most common mistake is that they don't value accounting. A
Hmm.
lot of these guys don't. They just want to get their tax return done, right? They have to file taxes at the end of the year, and they need books to do that. They need proper accounting to do that. But if they really took a look at their books and their accounting, at the end of the day, a lot of people in finance that own businesses, as long as they can make their payroll, right? As long as they can pay their people, and then they
Yeah.
can pay themselves. That's all they care about at the end of the day, right? They're not looking at if did I make a profit, Am I actually profitable? Am I going to be able to sustain this business? I can't tell you how many owners I've met that don't even know that the answer to that question, and
Mm,
it's there. They have it in their books, but they don't. And they've hired such bad accountants that I will say this: the level of talent out there for accounting has really gone down. It really
mm,
gone down, and like these kids don't want to take accounting anymore. I took accounting because I had a knack for it, but also I always knew I would have a job too, right? I wanted something secure. Um, but now these people, it's so hard to find a good accountant, and they never look at what their accountant is doing until something goes wrong, and then it's too
mm.
late.